A water leak of international proportions.
Groundwater for all the region cannot be jeopardized.
Crossing party lines hoping to fix health care.
So that Washington, D.C. is not as dysfunctional as people think.
Plus rail transportation in Arizona. This is Arizona Week. Hello and thanks for joining us. We begin our program along the U.S.-Mexico border in the Nogales area. It's been more than a week since a breach occurred in a cross-border sewer line. Every day, the underground pipe transports tens of millions of gallons of raw sewage from Nogales, Sonora to Nogales, Arizona. The breach has contaminated water in the Nogales Wash. Governor Doug Ducey issued a state of emergency. Arizona Public Media's Nancy Montoya traveled to Nogales earlier this week and joins me now. Nancy, thanks so much. What's the latest? Has it stopped?
Well, they're not sure if it stopped or not. What they have done is created a bypass, an 18,000-foot bypass to bypass the area where there is a leak. In other words, cap it on one end, put in a pipe bypass and cap it on the other end. They are conducting tests along the Santa Cruz River to see if they have it. However, they can't get into the wash to see where the leak is until the river water subsides. And that could take several weeks.
Now, how is it that the U.S. treats Mexico sewage? Can you explain this treaty that goes way back?
Right. You know, many people say, why in the world would the U.S. treat sewage from Mexico? Well, it has to do with the Santa Cruz River. The Santa Cruz River is the only river in the United States that flows south into, it actually flows south into Mexico from the U.S. It makes a U-turn, goes back into Mexico, and comes back to the U.S. The thing is that water is so precious to us here in Arizona that in 1962, there was part of a treaty between the U.S. and Mexico that said, we'll take your sewage, we'll treat it on the U.S. side. Well, that was when the treatment plant was only maybe a mile from the border. Since that time, in the 1970s, they moved it all the way up to Rio Rico, 9 miles away. And that pipe has been there for some portions 50 years, other portions 45 years, and it's not holding up well.
Now, this is an international issue. This week we had Congressman Raul Grijalva. He's home on recess break from Congress, and he made the trip down there. This is his area.
Consequences to riparian areas, the consequences to drinking water in the aquifers along this river and these arroyos around here is jeopardized when you have 13,000 gallons daily of a breach flowing into that water when we have these floods and when we have these rains.
Tell me, why is the Santa Cruz River so important?
It's a lifeline. It has been for some time immemorial. It continues to be a lifeline. It's a connector between us and Mexico, and it's a connector all the way to the Gila River. And so this source not only of water, but of groundwater for all the region cannot be jeopardized. That's the biggest environmental threat that we have right now.
Nancy, the International Boundary and Water Commission is in charge of this, but it's a binational effort. But who ultimately is going to foot the bill to fix this?
Well, according to the congressman, he thinks the feds should pick up the tab for it. The city of Nogales doesn't have the money. Santa Cruz County doesn't have the money. So it does fall, because of the treaty, to the federal government. There are some cost estimates that go up as high as $40 million, and it could take several years. This one small bypass that was created is costing about $300,000.
Nancy, you say the feds, we're talking U.S. and Mexican government?
Well, there's the controversy. The treaty was signed between the two countries. However, it was the U.S. that committed to paying for it. So back in 1972, we're almost 50 years later. Let's see if the feds will pick it up.
Nancy, thanks. You just heard from Congressman Raul Grijalva. He's back in Arizona on recess from Washington, D.C., and so is Congresswoman Martha McSally. Earlier this week, she spoke with Arizona Public Media's Christopher Conover about her role with the so-called Problem Solver Caucus, a bipartisan proposal by 43 representatives to stabilize the healthcare market, specifically by dealing with the medical device tax and the employer mandate. Congresswoman McSally says the group hopes the plan will start the conversation toward finding a solution to repealing and replacing the Affordable Care Act.
This is not fixing Obamacare for anyone who wants to attribute that. That's not, I mean, this gets so hijacked. Look, there's still a lot of things that I totally disagree with and do believe we need to move forward to a better sustainable model replacing it for the long run. But in the short run, we need to have laser focused support to address the individual market. And how are we going to do that? We're not just going to throw money at it. How do we target some structural changes and some things that can actually allow better choices, bring down costs, provide more opportunities, get some certainty so there's more choices for individuals that we represent? So that was our focus. Again, it was a tough problem, but we're the problem solver caucus. So we said, let's try and tackle this thing. And it took about 3 weeks. We came up with these 4 solutions. The intent is that this isn't specific legislation we want people to vote on like right now, but it should be the start of the discussion that goes through the committee process on both sides, the House and the Senate. It may not be the end result, but at least we were trying to break the fever and show, look, we've got to solve this problem now because 2018 is coming fast. And I think it's a pretty good start for those ideas.
As you said, this is a start. There are things in it you don't like, and you were the lead on it, or one of the leads on it. In order to get it through the caucus, the bipartisan caucus, you had to have a lot of approval within. This was the beginning of, I guess, it was its first committee almost.
It was, and governing is hard, and you don't always get what you want. As I've used an analogy, oftentimes when I've been in combat, I wish I was in different circumstances, and I wish I had different equipment, but you have to fight the war that you're in. And the one we're in right now is the clock is ticking, the individual market is collapsing, and we've got to do something to address it. So this was hard, but governing is hard, and it was give and take. But I do think for the things that I was focused on and the GOP's been focused on, there's some pretty significant wins with changing the employer mandate from 50 employees working 30 hours a week. So we hear from small businesses all the time in our community that are sitting at 49 employees or working a lot of part-time employees because the mandates, the penalties, the costs are way too high. So it's stifling job growth, this specific mandate. So we've moved it in our proposal to 500 employees and the standard 40-hour work week. This could be a game changer for small businesses. If they can start unleashing and grow and hire people and allow their employees to, if they do not provide insurance, to shop on the individual market, which could also help stabilize it, by the way. You get full-time workers shopping around with more choices. That could start bringing down premiums to sort of spread out the risk in the individual pool. So this is a pretty big win to get my teammates from the other side of the aisle to agree to this change. And secondly, the repeal of the medical device tax. I mean, this is one that has been included in several of the Republican bills, but also the standalone bill in Congress has dozens of Democrat co-sponsors to it. So there is some common ground there, and this does impact our community. So that's a pretty big win.
We saw a lot of politics, especially over on the Senate side in the last week or so around health care. So that begs the question on this. After this got released, we saw some bubbles of it the weekend before it was released, but after it was released, have you heard anything from leadership in either chamber and from the White House?
Our intent was, again, to break the fever and to provide some solutions and show, and also that Washington, D.C. is not as dysfunctional as people think, that there is a way for us to figure out how to work together and give and take, still have sincerely held beliefs about where this should go forward in the long run, but be laser focused on this specific challenge of the individual market collapsing and supporting repeal of some mandates that are impacting economic growth. So I think this is a start of the conversation, and it does provide the space in the discussion to say, wow, there's 43 Democrats and Republicans that came together. We had to have at least 50% of each side and 75% of our membership support our proposals for us to go public like we did, and we got those votes. So maybe this is the start of the conversation of where we need to end, but we'll let the committee process work itself through.
That was my question. Where do we go from here?
This was trying to put some meat on the bones of what a solution might look like going forward, and we expect to work through the committee process now, but hopefully give the space to the leaders of those committees that, hey, we were willing to step up and show that these are ideas that many of us can agree upon. You need to take these seriously, and we're going to support this and vote as a block as these things come through because we've stood together on this proposal. So we're going to keep working. We've been having conversations on the Senate side as well. I've talked to many senators over the last few weeks, making sure they understood the types of things that we were working on, and we got to continue to work with them going forward.
All right.
Much different news now. A follow-up to last week's program. Union Pacific says more than 50 trains travel through Tucson every day. The Port of Tucson functions as a logistical hub for Union Pacific Railroad. Shipping, receiving, loading, and unloading. Nearly 60 lifts a day, 6 days a week. It's a transportation hub for trains and 18-wheelers. Located in southeast Tucson along the interstate, the port is privately owned by the Levin family, who works closely with regional governments, and there are plans for expansion. Here's Mike Levin from the Port of Tucson.
Well, the Port of Tucson is about an 800-acre facility with 10 miles of rail, and we are a contractor to Union Pacific, and we provide really anything having to do with rail to truck and truck to rail connections. So as you can see in the background, we have our intermodal facility where we actually pull the containers off of the train and make them available to shipping companies and customers in the area, and then we also put them back on. And then in addition, we have other commodities that come in on boxcars, hopper cars, and whatnot. And so what we try to be is a hub or a connector to any of that rail traffic and make that accessible to southern Arizona.
Can you explain the logistics of once they come here, where do they go or where can they go?
Once they come into here or are leaving the area, they can go down into Mexico, into northern Mexico and Sonora. They go all the way to Phoenix. We're the exclusive contractor for intermodal for Union Pacific. So any of Union Pacific's intermodal containers destined for southern Arizona will actually go through this facility, even going up to Phoenix. Really, it's more just regional, southern Arizona and down into Mexico.
And then fair to say that some of these 18-wheelers go off east into the rest of the country via I-10?
Well, typically, once they go past, say, 600 to 700 miles, that's where we'd rather have those trucks on a rail car or have those containers on a rail car, and that's really where the benefit comes in, is that if it's a long haul, that you can put those containers on a rail and then ship them going east.
So how many different vendors or customers do you have that are filtering through this logistical hub?
Well, technically, we only have one, and that's because as the contractor to Union Pacific, we are really providing that service to them for the intermodal containers. When it comes to the other types of freight, like the boxcars and whatnot, we have around 12 customers that bring in various things from sugar, fertilizer, one customer that brings in beer from Mexico, and so probably about 12 on top of what we do with Union Pacific.
Can you explain how that international connection really happens, here in Tucson?
Well, one of the great things about Tucson is that it's off of the Union Pacific Sunset route, their main line. And so when you see a train going westbound towards Long Beach, probably anywhere between 60 and 80% of those containers are empty just because of balance of trade. So what we sort of envisioned here and what Dad's original vision was is to say, hey, this is the last or the best place for those shipping containers get a load going back to Asia. Help to balance address the balance of trade, and then so by pulling the containers off here, it makes those available to local companies for less expensive freight to, say, China or South Korea or say Taiwan. And because of that, we have companies that are sending, say, recycled materials in containers overseas. So it allows them to access markets they wouldn't have had before.
What is the Port of Tucson capable of in the future?
It's sort of an interesting question because of the fact that we really wake up every morning and see what's the opportunity that day. We don't really have a strategic plan other than the fact that we have rail and we have land, we have warehousing. Southern Arizona is growing as a logistics hub, and so I think what we'll see is just any of those logistics opportunities or transportation opportunities, both local and international, that's what we see the growth in. Right now, with expansion of our infrastructure, we're probably only at maybe 15% capacity of what we're capable of. And so we're able to bring on new business very quickly as far as rail or warehousing logistics. So really, I think just a growth in the overall logistics in southern Arizona.
There are the skeptics out there will say that the Tucson's economy is challenged, that the rail industry is not what it once was. What do you say to them?
I'd say that, by the numbers we see and the volumes we see, the numbers tell a different story. The way the actual activity that's going on, it's a much different picture. the volumes for our intermodal, including the international, are continuing to grow. All of the other commodities are continuing to grow. And so really, I'd say that if they want a tour, they can come out and I can show them exactly what we're doing and how real vibrant the rail activity is for Southern Arizona.
The Port of Tucson's primary customer is Union Pacific Railroad. On last week's program, we showed you hundreds of parked locomotives along the Union Pacific network here in Southern Arizona. This company says it's a result of the economy. The 310 locomotives are stored in maintenance until they're put back into service, which is slowly happening as the economy improves. Union Pacific spokesman Jeff DeGraff traveled to Tucson from Texas. Here he is now with how railroad industry uses the Port of Tucson.
The Port of Tucson is very valuable for Union Pacific. It's one of our partners that's very important to us here in this region. What this location allows is for our trains carrying cargo to come in and trucks access those containers and take them what we call the last mile, from off the train to the distribution centers or warehouses, so that those customer products can get into the hands of the customers. Working with the Port of Tucson here has allowed us to show our customers, the people that ship on our trains, how efficient we can be by taking their goods a long distance and then getting them to a place like the Port of Tucson where they can get loaded and sorted out and into their customers' hands very quickly and efficiently.
What sorts of cargo comes off the boxcars and then boards to semis?
What you see here at the Port of Tucson, we have two different kind of trains that utilize this facility. One kind of train is our intermodal train, which carries those large cargo containers that you see coming in the big ships that cross the ocean. They get loaded onto a train at a port along the coast. We bring them all the way across the country to a place like Port of Tucson here, and they have cranes that will take those containers off of the train and drop them right onto a semi-truck. And that truck will then take it to a distribution center or warehouse. Inside that cargo container can be just about anything that a consumer would order. Whether it's something that you ordered from an online retailer, furniture, a book, or any clothing, things like that, as well as some larger items like appliances or heavy equipment can get shipped in these kind of containers. So a lot of consumer-driven products come on board these cargo containers. The other type of trains that we see here at the Port of Tucson are what we call our manifest trains. Those are the box cars that you see on the trains. They're hauling different kinds of goods, whether it's agriculture products or food and beverage. We ship a lot of beer and alcohol on our trains that get to places like here at the Port of Tucson where they're loaded onto trucks and sent out to their distribution centers. So this facility allows us to interact with other modes of transportation like trucks so that we can get those products into the hands of the consumers.
You just mentioned it comes in off a ship. And that means from China, Union Pacific, to products here in the U.S. Can you explain that this is actually a component of work for you guys?
Absolutely. Union Pacific is a key player in international trade. A lot of the products and items that we consume or that we buy here in the United States comes and is manufactured overseas. And those products need to get into the hands of the consumers here in America. And a lot of times they'll be shipped over in barges, and those large containers need to get from the coast to the interior of the United States, and that's where freight rail comes into play, and that's the value of the service that we provide, because large volumes of those materials can now come in and be delivered miles and miles and miles from any seaport here in the United States. So we can facilitate that transportation. We can play that role in getting goods from manufacturers into the hands of the consumers.
It sounds to me like Union Pacific is growing, is becoming more innovative with collaborations like this one. Is that correct?
For Union Pacific, we've been around for more than 150 years, and we've survived and grown through those years through collaborations and partnerships. Initially here within the United States, and now as the economy is going global for everyone, we're working with global partners as well. And that's the future. As we see more global commerce and a global economy, those goods need to be shipped. And Union Pacific is prepared to take on those challenges as we embrace a global marketplace. We we talk about the electronic age and the digital economy and things like that. And you know, as much time as we may spend on the internet doing our banking, ordering and paying for things, there comes a point in time when those goods actually have to be delivered and distributed. And that's where Union Pacific plays its part. You know, you can order and do things online, but you can't deliver something online. That's where freight rail and our partners and other modes of transportation come into play.
Where does Arizona fit in the growth of Union Pacific? It sounds like it's growing.
Absolutely. Our presence here in Arizona is growing. Arizona is a key area for Union Pacific. We're seeing a lot of development and growth along the border. And having Arizona being a business-friendly environment, you're seeing a lot of industries that are being attracted here. And Union Pacific wants to help those industries grow by providing mass volume logistics that we can offer through freight rail. So as Arizona grows, Union Pacific will be here to support that growth. Hopefully our presence here also makes Arizona an attractive piece for other industries to locate here and take advantage of the services that we're offering. Additionally, just logistically speaking, Arizona sits in a prime location for the transportation of our goods, you know, across the country. Arizona sits right in the middle of what we call our Sunset Service Unit, which connects Los Angeles all the way into Texas. And so maintaining our presence, maintaining our infrastructure, using our capital dollars to make sure that our infrastructure stays in the best shape possible so that we can continue that thoroughfare through the state. That's of huge importance for Union Pacific.
So what's the future of rail? What are some of the challenges? For more on that, I'm joined by Eric Anderson, the Transportation Director for the Maricopa Association of Governments. He joins us via our sister station in Phoenix, KAAT. Eric, hi there. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Eric, let's talk about the rail industry in Arizona. How significant is it? Has it grown over the years?
Well, it has grown as the statewide economy continues to grow. Both imports and exports using rail have continued to grow too, especially on the freight side throughout Arizona. There's a lot of trains going through Flagstaff. At one point prior to the recession, there were almost 140 trains a day going through the Flagstaff area on the BNSF line up there, and then the Union Pacific main line, which goes through Tucson, has about 60 trains a day, so a lot of activity in the state.
What's a projection for growth or the hope when it comes to passenger commuter rail?
Obviously, in Metro Phoenix, we have 26 miles of light rail now. Tucson has the modern streetcar running to downtown. Here in the Phoenix area, ridership has exceeded all expectations, and I think it's a good sign that people really understand the role of what we call fixed guideway transit, like light rail transit. Our plans are to continue to expand that in the metro area, both to the north, the northwest, and the west part of the valley here. So we're very optimistic about that. And then we've done a lot of planning for passenger rail on the rail lines, commuter rail, which would complement, hopefully some point in the future, we'll have good passenger service between Tucson and Phoenix too. And so commuter rail is something that it may be 10 plus years off into the horizon here in the metro area, but we also think that's going to be an important part of our transportation system moving forward in the future.
You take cars off the interstates and off the highways, you put them on rail, and that just makes things a little bit easier for people.
Oh, it certainly does. We saw the evidence of that when we had some major events here, the Final Four, the Super Bowl. During the Super Bowl weekend, light rail carried 125,000 persons on one day. And there's just no way you can move that massive number of people in and out of the downtown Phoenix area, as an example. And so as we continue to build up, our highway capacity can't continue to expand. We create unsafe conditions. You can't just keep adding lanes. And so you really have to look at the next option, which is high capacity transit either heavy rail using the Union Pacific and BNSF lines, or light rail, which in this area is actually in the street. Both those modes have a lot of capacity to carry a lot of people, and that really does relieve some of the problems we have on the freeway system. Here in Metro Phoenix, we're always going to have congestion. There are too many people wanting to go to the same place at the same time, and so there's always going to be congestion. But the rail alternative does provide people with options, and so they can get out of traffic, enjoy a nice ride on the train, and get to where they want to go.
Does Arizona have the infrastructure, the economy, even the leadership to sustain plans for growth moving forward when it comes to rail?
Freight transportation on rail is extremely important. The mines here in Arizona are extensive users of the freight rail system, and so we have to continue to make sure that we have healthy infrastructure in that regard. But as in the case in many areas in transportation, funding continues to be a challenge. We're always trying to prioritize projects, match them up with available funding, and unfortunately sometimes the rail projects are a little bit, go down that list a little bit. So we'll continue to look for funding, especially the Phoenix-Tucson passenger rail project in particular will require a significant investment by the state to get that off the ground.
Aside from funding being one of the challenges, is environmental components as well play a role in this?
Well, certainly the environmental components are extremely important, especially if we're looking at new rail corridors. On the commuter rail side, it's anticipated that the commuter rail operations will hopefully operate in the same railroad corridors that we have today. Light rail is, in this region, is running in the streets for the most part. And so the environmental issues are a little bit less significant because you already have a kind of a disturbed environment in that regard.
We often hear that the rail industry is not what it used to be, but it sounds like it is. It's just changing, and it's taking on a new form.
I think that's true. I think that the rail industry continues to advance with better technologies. One of the things we're looking forward to is positive train control, which hopefully will provide extra level of safety for the railroad industry in Arizona. Actually a nationwide objective, but especially as we move into the more passenger rail activities, safety is going to become even more important in the future.
And that's our program. For all of us at Arizona Public Media, I'm Lorraine Rivera. Thanks for joining us.